who has been pure from the beginning, O Manjushri, O loving one, with your brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness and close in my mind, enlighten my intelligence or wisdom, so I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them. Sorry for not unmuting myself. Yeah, I've just done it. Apologies. All right, let's go for refuge and bodhicitta. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right. Good afternoon. So that's a final week for this module. We have another one coming up. I think that, I suspect that Geshe-la might even finish this chapter maybe this week. If not this week, then probably in the first week of the next installment. And Geshe-la also thought of doing the dedication chapter, chapter number 10. So we'll have chapter number 9 left out. It's a very difficult chapter, chapter number 9. And as Shantideva says at the beginning of the 9th chapter, all these other branches were taught for the sake of generating wisdom. So that's the 9th chapter, the chapter on wisdom. But the presentation in the 9th chapter is so complicated. It is very terse. One of the most condensed presentation of wisdom. So without doing some preparatory work of studying different schools of thought within Buddhist philosophy and looking at what they think selflessness is, and also what they make of consciousness and other things, if you go straight into the wisdom chapter, it's pretty hard going. So we decided to leave that aside for probably a couple of years. We'll do, after this topic, we're going to study Lorig, which means awareness and knowers, different types of consciousness, minds and mental factors. Then 10, it's the different schools of thought within Buddhist philosophy. Next year, I suppose that we'll study maybe a commentary to the Heart Sutra. Probably, what else? Maybe Mahayana mind training. Maybe the Will of the Ornament, Buddha nature, unsurpassed Tantra. So I think that being introduced to those topics creates a better background for looking at the 9th chapter of Shantideva's text. Anyway, during the weekend, I sent out some review questions. I thought that some of them might be a little bit complicated. I'm wondering if you have any questions arising from the review questions, for those of you who had the chance to look at the review questions, or questions that have arisen from today. What I thought of doing today was to maybe just wrap up Geshe-la's comment about self-cherishing, and then to look at the practice that we've discussed today, in which we exchange self with others in adopting the positions of others. So let's begin with, if you have any questions or doubts, then. So the question is, how can you, I'm repeating it for the people at home. So how can we exchange self with others in that way in which we develop jealousy, pride, competitiveness, and so forth? So how do we reconcile that with also viewing all sentient beings as equal? Yeah, it's a good question. And also I think that when we look at what Shantideva is saying here, let's look at verse, I think, 140. So taking someone inferior and so forth, or we said that inferior means worse off or better off or equal to himself. and taking himself to be the other, a bodhisattva should meditate upon envy, competitiveness, and pride, with mind free of conceptualization. So to begin with, it instructs us here, it instructs a bodhisattva to meditate on jealousy, competitiveness, and pride. So do you agree that these three are afflictive states of mind? So if there are afflictive states of mind, they are to be eliminated, right? So when Shantideva says here that we should meditate on pride, jealousy, and competitiveness, is it telling us actually to meditate on afflictive states of mind? So Chuk is kind of webbing ahead vehemently from shoulder to shoulder, from head to toe. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so we said that Bodhisattva should meditate on them, but it's not that really the attitude that you develop are jealousy, pride, and competitiveness. In some sense, you can say that they bear similarities with them, but in no way Bodhisattva should generate those afflictive states of mind in his mind. So in actual sense, it is a way to, this type of meditation is a way to antidote our own afflictive states of mind. So I'm going a round way to look at your question, Tai. So first of all, when Shantideva says that we should meditate on that, it just says that we should adopt the positions of others and look at the type of attitude that we have between oneself and others, which are affected by our ignorance, and try to counter them in order to apply antidotes to our afflictions. So rather than developing afflictions, this section is saying that we should antidote our afflictions. Now, afflictions are biased states of mind, which then create the vision of inequality between living beings. So then I think that one way of looking at your question that ties to say that when you adopt the position of others, and you do it first of all in looking at those who are doing worse off than you. So I think that normally when we look at those who are doing worse off than us, or particularly I think that we live in a polarized world, looking at the political system, wherever we live, either here or in India, Israel, New Zealand, or what have you. Sometimes politics become so polarized that we think that all of those that we disagree with are on a lower moral ground than us, and we kind of develop that sense of we are right and they are wrong. We are ethical, they are unethical, and so forth. So I think that from a Buddhist perspective, or from the perspective of this tradition, we want to develop, first of all, an equal state of mind that recognizes that all of us want to be happy, and no sentient beings wants to suffer, even those that we disagree with. But also, because of holding I and others to exist inherently as if we exist completely in and of ourselves, there is that in our mind that idea of us and others as being completely separate, distinct, and cut off, as if we are not related to each other, or as if we do not depend upon each other. And because of that, we develop a sense of, for example, disdain towards others. We look down on their positions. We think that they're uncouth or kind of unethical, or they are not compassionate, and so forth. So we adopt basically the higher moral ground, and they seem to be lower than us. So actually, this meditation is supposed to antidote that in looking at that from their perspective. So particularly when we think of, for example, here, when we speak of developing bodhicitta, developing compassion, practicing patience, practicing generosity, practicing so forth, we adopt the positions of others and look back on ourselves and say that actually we are not actually putting it into practice, or we haven't done it to the degree that we think we have. So rather than kind of still holding on to the sense of division, it's actually undermining the sense of who we are, in the sense that we have that idea of ourselves as being good practitioners, ethical practitioners, patient, compassionate, and so forth. So when we look at ourselves from the positions of others, actually we come to say that we might think that we are like that, but we're actually not. So it's more like, you know, sometimes when I think of how it's something that Yeshe said last week. She said that if someone, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you recognize your own shortcomings, you can be critical of yourself in a kind of in a constructive way, because then you can say that these are my deficiencies and I need to address them. If other person is telling you exactly the same way, telling us exactly the same way, then we think, how dare they say that? You know, if they point out the same things, we become a bit annoyed with them. So we use this technique here in which we think, a similar technique in which we have some blind spots. We don't have a mirror in front of us, and the mirror is actually being held by another person. So we adopt that position and looking back at ourselves in order to find out those faults. So if we look down on others in thinking that we're more educated than others, we are more ethical than others, we are more generous than others, we are more, we might be kind of better off in terms of financial situation or in terms of a good looks or what have you. So when we then think that I am following the Mahayana tradition, I am following the Bodhisattva path, I am endeavoring to be a compassionate person, when you look at it from that perspective, actually, we don't live up to those standards. So we look back at the old self and think, actually, whatever we've done so far is not enough. We should work better for the sake of others. Definitely not treat them with a sense of disdain, but with a greater sense of compassion. Could you practice it to the degree in which you cannot practice it anymore because you've eliminated all afflictions? That's the goal. Yeah. 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 Well, yeah. If you can practice it, it means that you have afflictions. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kind of, you know, when you look at, I think that when you look at the end goal is exactly as you described it, you know, like you want to practice it to the point in which you do no longer have either envy towards others or pride over others or a sense of rivalry in which you wish to outdo others. I think that kind of, you know, sometimes when we discuss it on a practical sense and academically, when we try to get a hand around whether it is possible to do it, whether it is a logical thing to do it, whether it's reasonable to do it. As I said before, I always kind of think of teachers that I know that it seems that they've done this practice, they've adopted this attitude, and it seems that this is what we aspire to do. Those are the qualities that we want to embody. So when you look at the way that it's honest, the Dalai Lama, for example, has a way of relating to everyone as equal. You know, whether he meets a beggar in the street or whether he meets someone of high level, the attitude is always that kind of warm-hearted, eye-to-eye attitude. Now, remember that I've seen him coming to official ceremonies just wearing flip-flops, thumbs. Do you say thongs? Thongs, yeah. Can't get my head around this word. Flip-flops. Yeah, that's much easier to say. Anyway, but it's not kind of being too casual. It's more like it kind of strips that level of I'm higher than others or enjoy that high status. And if he's communicating with others exactly on a humanistic level, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche is exactly the same way, and other teachers that some of us have encountered. So I think that it is possible to do it. So since we started with that, I wanted to so one of the points that kind of made at the beginning is that we don't know that when we think of, let's look at the outline. In the practice, the way to practice after reflected on this exchange is the way jealousy of those hard in oneself is cultivated, competitiveness is cultivated, or pride over those who lower themselves is cultivated, first of all, they are not real afflictions. Or like kind of we're just adopting the position of others, looking back at ourselves and seeing that actually so far our attitude hasn't been pretty spot on for those who aspire to practice the Bodhisattva path. And particularly when you think that, is it possible for, in the commentary, when we look at how Getza Dhammarinchen explains that, it names that Bodhisattva Devadatta. And it can really do your heading, in thinking that how come a Bodhisattva have such a terrible attitude? Because the way that it is found in the commentary is really, it's really hardcore. So rather than think of this as a Bodhisattva attitude, we can think of ourselves. Here, Shantideva is teaching us how to practice Bodhichitta, how to practice equalizing, exchanging self for others. So replace the name, the Bodhisattva Devadatta, with your name, and think of, first of all, the way in which we look down on others with a sense of contempt. At least I can find people that I have a bit of contempt to, unfortunately. I mean, we want to be free from that, but we do have our own imprints and things that we've gotten used to before. So those are the things that we work with. So here, I wanted to read what Khenpo Kumpan says with respect to that in page 399 in his commentary. So it says, actually, before we do that, let's look at those verses. So I'm going kind of a long way, or kind of speaking at length about the question that you asked. I'll get, hopefully, is that what I wanted to share? No. This is it. So we begin with the first one. So we put ourselves in the position of others. We look, so those are those who are doing worse off than us. So we look at ourselves and think that that person that we were before is honored, but we are not. We have not found possessions as he has. He is praised, but we are disparaged. He is happy, but we suffer. We do the work while he abides in comfort. Right, so particularly when we look back at the old self, that which wants to practice the Bodhisattva conduct but doesn't do it properly. He is renowned as great in this world, but we as inferiors with no good qualities. We have no good qualities. What to do? All of us are to be endowed with good qualities. There are those in comparison to whom he is inferior, and there are those in comparison to whom we are supreme. So I wanted to begin with this section. It says, as I said in the commentary, it says, now allow yourself to feel that person's envy. Looking up at your former self, someone talented, think how happy he must be, praised and respected by all and all sundry. You, on the other hand, are nothing. I mean, you kind of as those who are doing worse off than your previous self. So you are nothing, nobody, a complete down and out, despised and utterly miserable. The person you are looking at is rich, has plenty to eat, clothes to wear, money to spend, while you have nothing. He is respected for being learned, talented, well-disciplined. You, on the other hand, are dismissed as a fool. He enjoys a wealth of every comfort and happiness. You, by contrast, are a pauper. Your mind weighed down with worries, your body racked with disease, suffering, and the discomforts of heat and cold. So you have to work like a slave. Where is it? Sorry. Digging, harvesting grass while he can just sit back with nothing to do. As these thoughts pass through your mind, feel your envy, right? So we think of putting ourselves in the position of those who are doing worse off than us and feel how kind of from their perspective, we actually get the upper hand and they kind of have to do, they're doing pretty miserably. So here's servants and a private horse. Do we have private horses? Probably not. You have. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, we have brush tickets. So a private horse on whom he inflicts great deal of discomfort and suffering is not even aware that they are in distress, and there he is, also comfortable. And as if that weren't enough, he gets angry and lashes out, weeping and beating us. Put yourself in the position of these poor victims and take the suffering on yourself, right? So when we put ourselves in their position, we start to kind of not just look at our former self and get a perspective, but just kind of try to, when we need to try to feel of how it'd be like to be actually in that situation where other people not only look down on you, but also you have to do all the work. Your body's um, your body is suffering. You are in a disadvantageous situation. So put yourself in the position of his poor victims and take the suffering on yourself. If you manage to do this, it is said that you will come to recognize their sorrows. So compassion for them will grow and you will stop hurting them. So when you adopt their position, rather than thinking that kind of I'm doing better than them, actually you start to feel their suffering. Actually, sometimes when we think of, if I go back to living in a polarized society, when politics are kind of so sometimes polarized, and when I try to put myself in the shoes of those that I disagree with, like for example, supporters of Pauline Hanson or what have you. Normally kind of I have that sense that they're so, when normally the way I think about it is like they're so selfish or so bigoted and so forth. But actually, when you put yourself in their shoes and think of how it would be like to live with a limited mind that is so subject to kind of this division of us and them, which is based on fear and also kind of on a certain degree of aggression and also probably pain, then try to feel the suffering or this pain rather than kind of thinking that you're morally more advanced to them or kind of politically you're superior to them, so to speak. So this is sometimes the way that I try to think about it, although it's easier said than done. So here the commentary says compassion for them will grow and you will stop hurting them. And then it says, where was that section that I wanted to read? Just a second. All right, so then when you look at verse yeah, so you can put yourself in the shoes of others and forgive their anger towards you. And what was the other thing they said? Yeah, and the general behavior. Well, you can so first of all, you want to, we can recognize based upon our own personal experience how anger is a painful state of mind. So when we get angry and act on the basis of anger, we harm others either physically or verbally. So we can think that we might harm others, but to begin with, the person that is harmed is we ourselves, because anger is not a pleasant state of mind, and that if we would be given the choice whether we are going to get angry or not get angry in a certain situation. So there's something that is unjust that is doing that is happening to us. Someone is harming us, or we receive something that we do not wish for. So if you're kind of going to weigh your options, am I going to know, is it better to react to that with the anger, or is it better to solve the situation without being angry? I think that all of us would go for no anger, but still resolve the situation. So we see that anger, first of all, is a painful state of mind. So we can certainly see that when they get angry with us, first of all, they're suffering. We can also then see what they do on the basis of their anger. And when we forgive them, it's not that we say that it was all right what they do, so we can still recognize a wrong behavior to be wrong behavior. We can still condemn a wrong behavior and try to, as much as possible, to stop it. But then looking at it from the perspective of others and seeing how they act in that way because they are motivated by anger. And when we ourselves are motivated by anger, we do similar things. I mean, maybe sometimes not to that extent, but also we sometimes go out of control when we become angry. So in that sense, it's, if someone is completely crazy, if you come across someone that is insane, crazy, or really deluded, and they're insulting you, and you know that that person is crazy, you don't take it too hard. You think that, well, they said that because they're not in the right mind. Well, it's both. Yeah, it's both compassion and forgiveness. I mean, if you can have compassion for that person, you're much better able to forgive them. Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to pull out from this verse is, from this section, apart from kind of saying that, well, actually, we were attempting to practice bodhicitta, compassion, the practice of bodhisattvas, by not doing that well when we see the way that we treat others. But also, when we look at verse 143, it says in the second line, all of us are to be endowed with good qualities. Particularly what we mean here when we adopt the position of others is to recognize that all sentient beings have a Buddha nature. So when we look down on others, when we belittle others, we forget that they have a Buddha nature, or we oversee the fact that they have Buddha nature. So we put ourselves in the position of others and see that those that we normally look down on, actually, they have Buddha nature. Just like us, they have the ability to become Buddha. So if we aspire to practice the Bodhisattva conduct, our job is to help them. Our job is to do whatever we can in order to be of benefit to them, so that we can lead them at the end to the path that leads to their own state of liberation and enlightenment. And it is possible because they have Buddha nature. So we have to remind ourselves of that. So that's another antidote for pride, right? So one antidote for pride is to just look at ourselves from their perspective and see that we are not doing what we should be doing as bodhisattvas. That's one thing. The second point is to look at it from their perspective and to recognize that they also have Buddha nature. That's the second point. The third one, in this verse, says, there are those in comparison to whom he is inferior, and there are those in comparison to whom we are supreme. So the third way to bring down this pride is also to recognize that when we become proud, when we condescend others, we have that idea that the inherently existing I is doing much better than the inherently existing others. So here we'll look at self and others in a relative way. I might be doing better than others, but definitely others that are doing better than me, right? So that's another way of reducing pride. So at the end, in page 301, this commentary says, this is how to meditate on envy and resentment as the chief antidote to pride. By appreciating the suffering involved in being a poor and insignificant person without talents or honor, you come to realize how wrong it is to be arrogant and scornful. It dawns on you how unpleasant it is for people in a humble position when you are proud and supercilious towards them. You should stop behaving like this and begin to treat other people with respect, providing them with sustenance and clothing, and working to help them in practical ways. So that's the first section, which we already covered last week, but I thought it's good to do it again. Then next point is the way pride over those lower than oneself is cultivated. From verse 151 to 154. Let's read through that quickly. It is said that this afflicted one is competing with us, but how can he be equal to us in hearing, wisdom, form, class, or wealth? So here we are kind of looking at those that are equal to us, or that we're doing slightly better than them, right? You could be doing slightly better than another person, not like hugely better than another person, just you're outdoing them slightly, but you want to do it better and better, being competitive. So again, here, competitiveness in general, in wanting to outdo people, is considered to be an affliction, an afflictive state of mind. So I thought it's quite interesting to think of competition in a general way in society. Like you have competition in sports where you have to excel in sports. Here, I think that we speak about competition in a slightly different way. You want to kind of basically you want to outdo others in terms of your wisdom, your qualities, your wealth, your physical appearance, your social status, and so forth, because I think that it is centered around the 8 worldly concerns, right? So liking happiness, disliking pain, liking gain, disliking no gain, liking praise, disliking blame, liking fame, disliking infamy. So from a Buddhist perspective, this is what spoils our spiritual practice. So this sense of competition is fueled by those 8 worldly concerns, and this is what we want to rid ourselves of, right? So was it verse 1? Yeah, 147. Actually, I should have read for verse 147. In order that we may surpass he who is regarded as equal to us, we shall definitely attain possessions and honor for ourselves, even through dispute. By all means, we shall make clear to the entire world the good qualities we have, but we shall not let anyone hear of any of his good qualities. Also, we shall hide our faults. We will be venerated, not him. We will find a great deal of possessions today. We will be honored, not him. For a long time, I shall look with pleasure at his being made sinful. It will become a laughing stock, the laughing stock of all migrating beings, and be derided amongst all. This is where we started off actually today in Geshe-la's session. So again, here, and I'm linking it up with your question, Ty, with your first question, we think of how when we want to compete with others for praise and fame and good looks and honor and possessions and so forth, we put ourselves in the positions of others, and we think that actually we'll do better than the previous self, the one that is controlled by self-cherishing. So in that sense, we now, the general public that are doing just the same, we're going to find faults in that person, the self-cherishing person, and speak about our good qualities. We're going to get the upper hand. We're going to make sure that we're going to get the upper hand. They're going to get the lower hand. So in general, we say that we should always speak about the qualities of others, right? So when we come across other people, we tend to observe, often we find faults in other people, or sometimes even when they do have faults, we tend to exaggerate them. We make a big deal out of their faults. So a general advice in the Dhamma is, rather than to look for faults in other people, or to, even when you see fault in another person, just don't look at that fault, don't exaggerate that, but think of the good qualities of others. So here we do exactly the same thing. We put ourselves in the shoes of others and think that actually, I have good qualities, we have good qualities. We're going to emphasize the good qualities and hide our faults. We're going to look at the faults of that self-cherishing person that we have been before, and not speak of his good qualities, right? So that's a movement that counteracts that sense of competitiveness. So could you say that competitiveness is an affliction because through competing, you wishing other person to lose? Well, it is kind of, it is part of the competitiveness sentiment, right? You want to attain victory and offer the defeat to others. So this winner and loser attitude is certainly something that is based, first of all, on a strong sense of grasping at a self, thinking that I exist independently and therefore I need that independence happiness. But also then it is involved with a strong degree of self-cherishing, and both of this combo of self-cherishing and self-grasping is a source of quite a lot of problems and difficulties that we experience. When we look at the things that we do with motivated by anger and attachment and jealousy and pride and so forth, it seems that many of them are involved with wanting victory and wishing the defeat upon others. Sometimes it's hard to kind of set it apart from other afflictions, other afflictive states of mind. Sometimes they come, it seems that in one package. So in my class notes, see. So before changing your perspective, then me, a practitioner of Bodhichitta, we think that I have mundane qualities or Dhamma qualities of study, reflection, and meditation. Now, other beings, before that exchange, think we too have such qualities, either equal or slightly better or slightly lower, right? So we're doing more or less the same. So the affliction is competitiveness. The attitude that we adopt when we exchange others is competitive towards those who are equal. So when we exchange, when we adopt the position of others, we look back on my old self and think that I will outdo them. I will proclaim my good qualities and hide my qualities, hide the qualities of my older self. I will publicly expose the faults of my old self, lapse ethics and such. So the outcome of such exchange is applying an antidote to jealousy and rivalry, right? So when we think of those who are doing, let's say, slightly better than us, or even equal to us, we might have a little bit of jealousy towards them. We want to outdo them. So you come to recognize your own faults in being competitive, and thereby you stop behaving like that. Instead, you do whatever you can to help your rivals, right? So think of, I think that actually there was, since we spoke of competition, I remember from, I think that maybe it was from past Olympics or the one before, there were, there was a runner. Actually, that was not from the Olympics, that was more recent. So there was a runner that got confused about the direction. They were the leader of the pack. They was about to lose they were about to win the race, and they took a wrong turn. The one that was in second place stopped and kind of brought them back and let them cross over the line, because they were the one that deserved to win. Have you seen that story? It was, I think that it happened either a few months ago or a year ago. Sorry? Yeah. Eric the Eel, he was a great swimmer. Have you heard of Eric the Eel in New Zealand? Yeah. He's an Australian icon, although he's not Australian. Yeah, it was from Ghana, maybe? Yeah. Eric the Eel. Yeah, check it out on YouTube. It's a great video. Anyway. So then comes the even harder one with pride. So The way pride over those lower to oneself is cultivated, actually that's from verse 151 to 154. It is said that this afflicted one is competing with us, but how can it be equal to us in hearing wisdom, form, class, or wealth? Thus, upon hearing of our good qualities that have been made known to all, we shall thoroughly enjoy the delight of the excitement giving rise to goose pimples, to goosebumps. Even though he has some possessions, if he is working for us, we shall give him just enough to live on, and by force will take the rest. His comfort will decline, and I shall involve him with harm. Actually, it sounds pretty harsh, but now when you think about, I guess that when you think about someone like us that is endeavoring to practice bodhicitta and compassion, when we, sometimes we want to become like this. We think that we are already a level of those great practitioners, as if kind of we are on par with Lama Zopa, that we are on par with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or that we are on par with other great practitioners. So we put ourselves in their shoes and recognize that actually we haven't done all the legwork that is required in order to get to that elevated state. Actually, yeah, probably it's a bit extreme. It's a bit extreme to think that that you're just like Lama Zopa, but you're His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But I think that probably we can find people around us that actually are doing much better than us. Much better than us in terms of their ethics and genuine approach and kind-heartedness and so forth. And we sometimes think that actually we're just like them, or we have ascended to, we've developed qualities just like them. But actually, when you look at ourselves from their position, we can come to see that we actually haven't reached that stage yet. And I think that this is what this third part of the practice is doing, with kind of making us see that actually we haven't developed those excellent qualities that we might be thinking, might be attributing to ourselves. So I'll go back for a second to my class notes and then look at Khenpo Kumpa's comment. So practicing with those who are better off than you and would look down on you in general. Actually, looking down is probably, it might not always be the right word, but those who are basically doing better than you. Yeah. So you think of yourself before the exchange, you think that I have some qualities. And the affliction is trying to put myself on par with those of great qualities, bodhisattvas, teachers, lamas, great practitioners, and so forth. So then, and other beings, which means those who are doing better than you, they think that we have qualities of erudition, wisdom, there might be good looks. Sounds pretty worldly, doesn't it? Good looks, social rank, wealth or possessions, what have you. So the attitude that you develop when you put yourself in the position, you try to look down on your previous self and see that actually you don't have those qualities that you attribute to yourself. So looking back at the old self and thinking that this old self with such poor qualities can never compete with us. So the outcome of the exchange is you apply an antidote to jealousy. No, jealousy of those who are higher than you. You come to recognize your own faults and think that since done with that beginning, your own self-cherishing mind has created all unwished for problems for you. You think that for as long as you continue to develop your mind, you will get you'll get by on less and offer the rest to others. So in the verses that we've covered is the point that we shall take away from the person or give them enough to get by and take all the rest to us. So think about it from the viewpoint of the Bodhisattva practice, in which we think that I'm going to dedicate my body possessions and roots of virtue for the sake of others, so that in dependence upon that, I will attain a state of enlightenment to be of benefit to all sentient beings. So then when we look at it from the perspective of those who are doing better than us, like, if you do try to think of yourself in the shoes of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Tsongkhapa and so forth, they will look back at us and say, well, actually, if we want to develop compassion to others, if we want to develop bodhicitta, we should actually get by on less. Just use whatever we need for our day-to-day survival, and the rest, as our intention, should go to others. So rather than kind of thinking about it as a harsh attitude in which someone is taking away things that we have right to, we look at ourselves as those who have committed ourselves to practice bodhicitta. Particularly in the third chapter, we have taken upon ourselves the Bodhisattva vow, in which we have made a commitment to work for the sake of others, to practice generosity, ethics, patience, and so forth. So when we look at it from the perspective of our spiritual teachers, for example, we look back at us and said that actually, since this is the commitment that you make, that we have made, stand by your commitment. Stay true to your words. With Lama Sovereign Rinpoche. Yeah, actually, it's pretty kind of, yeah, there are many examples of that, but it's kind of sometimes it's quite interesting when you have students that come to see Lama Sovereign Rinpoche with great offerings. They've thought long before about what they're going to offer to Lama Sovereign Rinpoche, or to this Lama or the other Lama, and they sometimes get those rare and precious items. They make those offerings, and the following day they see someone else going out of their room kind of carrying this as a present. Give it to someone else. Yeah, Chucky is saying that someone offered Lama Sovereign Rinpoche Mala to bless, and they came back the following day, and Lama Sovereign Rinpoche looked around and said, sorry, it's already gone, already given away. Yeah, or also kind of when you look at, for example, when you see the financial dealings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Sovereign Rinpoche, Siddha Rinpoche, and so forth, whatever money they have, they give it to others, in a sense that either to charities or to monasteries or to societies or organizations or whatever. So if they look at us, those who aspire to practice the Bodhisattva conduct, and if we hold money, possessions, money, food or whatever, in thinking that this is for me to use so that I can be happy and we don't share it with others. Here, this verse says that we're going to take it away. It's going to be taken away from us, because this is the commitment that we've made. And it's going to be given to others. Where is this? Yeah. So even though he has some possessions, if he's working for us, right? So think of, for example, His Holiness Dalai Lama, thinking that, well, we have taken, how many times have we taken the Bodhisattva vow from His Holiness Dalai Lama? In the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Now we've taken that from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So we are working for them now. So since we are working for them, they will give us just enough to live on. And by force, we'll take the rest. So in page 303, in this commentary, it says, by using a spirit of rivalry in this way as an antidote to jealousy, you will come. Sorry, this is not what I wanted to read. I'm reading another page. Sorry. Page 303. In this way, use the meditation on pride as the principal antidote to jealous resentment. When people who are superior to you behave proudly and insult you with their overweening attitude, you will think to yourself, why are these people being so arrogant and offensive? But instead of being envious and resentful, change places with them. Using the meditation on pride, place yourself in that position of superiority and ask yourself whether you have the same feelings of pride and condensation. And if you do find that you too are proud and condescending and have scorn and contempt for those lower down than yourself, you will be able to look at those who are now behaving arrogantly towards you and think, well, yes, I can see why they feel the way they do. and you will serve them respectfully, avoiding attitudes of rivalry and contention. So I think that we sometimes we say that that the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others is a practice for those of sharp faculties. It's harder to practice than the sevenfold cause and effect person instruction. So first of all, we can think of how all along we've been speaking about arguments that pertain to the relative level, but also to the ultimate level, how we do not exist inherently and others do not exist inherently. We exist relative to each other and relative to others. We have high qualities, lower qualities, and so forth. So we're speaking about it from the ultimate level, but also, of course, from a relative level. But also this practice of changing positions with others and trying to look back on our old self and trying to find faults in our own attitude in order to make amendments, to reduce our own afflictive states of mind is hard work. It's hard work to begin with to understand those practices, but then also to have the courage to do it and to do admit that you have those faults, that we have those faults, and to reduce them. And all along, we're fighting against a self-cherishing attitude. So always saying, I always like to think, may others have my work, and I stay home and practice Dharma. Well, actually, I have to say that I have the same thing. I think that may others have to do my work so that I can just stay home and meditate. Yeah, we're in the same boat. So we have only 5 minutes left, and I wanted to. So first of all, does it answer your question, Tai? That's good. So what I wanted to do is just to go back to what Geshe said at the end of this session. Towards the end of the session, when we're discussing self-cherishing, whether it is an affliction or whether it is not an affliction. Did we discuss it at the beginning of this session? We have, haven't we? All right. Anyway, so Geshe continued with his position of self-cherishing being an affliction. And as I said previously, it's not, although we have been used to Geshe Tashering and Geshe Jamang saying vehemently that this is not an affliction because there is a fault in saying that it's an affliction, just as well you can find arguments like the one that Geshe Tsultrim presented today, and also arguments from other masters that say that it is an affliction. So I think that when you examine those argumentation, I think that in the whole presentation, you can see that actually probably they would come down on the same conclusion, although the way that they express it is different. So they might have an argument with the words, but the meaning I think that they will get to would be the same meaning. So for example, with Geshe Tashering, it says that there are two types of self-cherishing. There's, you can say, a positive one and a negative one. So negative type of self-cherishing is what Geshe described before. It is an affliction. So it is based on cherishing, grasping at the self. And because we grasp at the self, we think that our happiness is more important than the happiness of others. And we try to achieve it, even if it comes at the expense of others. So that's a negative type of self-cherishing. And this is what Geshe defines as an affliction. And also, if we, as Geshe said today, if we rid ourselves of ignorance of grasping on self, we would never behave in that way and thinking that our happiness is more important than the happiness of others. We'll never have attachment to some and aversion to others if we eliminate our ignorance of grasping at the self. So, and then Geshe Tashering was speaking also of a positive type of self-cherishing, positive from the perspective of you don't think that your happiness is more important than the happiness of others, but you think that what I can do for myself for the time being is attain the state of liberation. I can help myself. Helping others is kind of quite difficult. So at least I'll attain my own state of liberation and be happy for myself. So you don't think that your happiness is more important than others, but you just think that currently I'm unable to work for the sake of others. So I didn't get the way that you said this way. Okay. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Chuck is saying that some people say that going into retreat is a bit of a cop out because you remove yourself from a situation and kind of not deal with your problems or whatever. But actually, Chuck is saying that this is the best way to deal with them. Yeah. Yeah. And doing that is a type of self-cherishing. Yeah. I mean, I think that probably, sometimes people also think that becoming mundane is a bit of a cop out, because you kind of run away from society or run away from your social obligations. Yeah. Yeah. And the picture is not always nice, is it? When you take yourself with you. Yeah. So it's almost time to finish. I wanted to leave you here for today with one question to think about. In the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, the seventh step is bodhicitta, right? So we begin with recognizing all sentient beings as being amadis, developing the wish to, becoming mindful of their kindness, developing the wish to repay the kindness, loving kindness and compassion, fourth and fifth stages, then developing the wholehearted resolve in which we think that it is for me to separate or to liberate sentient beings from suffering. Then the seventh step is bodhicitta, in which we think that for that sake, I will attain the state of enlightenment. Here, when we're looking at the practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, there is no explicit statement in that practice in which we think that, therefore, I will attain the state of enlightenment. Well, when you think of the steps that we've covered up until now, so we practice equalizing self with others. We spoke of the drawbacks of cherishing ourselves, then the benefits of cherishing others, then the actual exchange. Now we're again going back to the drawbacks of cherishing ourselves. But it seems that in this practice, there is no explicit separate stage in which you think that, therefore, I will attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So I thought that maybe a good thing to think about, and also maybe to look at other texts, at other prayers and so forth, is to think of at which stage and how do you come to the conclusion then to attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of others on the basis of equalizing and exchanging self with others. All right, let's leave it here for now. Thank you. Due to this virtue, I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhichitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. While powerful to residence in Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves an bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you.